Hello and good evening. This is the Late Show on Wednesday, the 16th of June. Welcome. I am Naureen Khalid, your host on the Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. I'm just letting in some guests, so just give me a minute while I let people in. Uh, I've got, right, thank you. I seem to have some technical difficulties on this end. There was supposed to be an intro which buffered and then unbuffered somehow, and it's still buffering. So if it starts in the middle, I'm going to have to stop it and start again. But anyway, I'm Naureen Khalid, your host on The Late Show, and we are live on Teachers Talk Radio. Tonight, in the first half of the show, we will be discussing head teacher recruitment with Dr. Jill Berry, Jonathan Smith, and Kerry Standen. Later on, we'll talk to Ed Finch and the team behind Men Teach from Primary. There's somebody else coming into the studio. Let me get them in. So, very warm welcome to you all. Great to have you with me. If this is your first show, do join in with me and my guests by calling in or by using social media. If this is your first time tuning in, or you would like just to find out more, then please head over to our website www.ttradio.org. If you have thought about hosting a radio show of your own but didn't know where to start, then our website has details about how to get in touch with us. The team will be delighted to hear from you, and you may become one of uh, one of our first hosts, new host with a show of your own. I'm delighted to have with us tonight some really fabulous guests. First up, to talk to us about head teacher recruitment are Dr. Jill Berry, Jonathan Smith, and Kerry Standen. In the second half of the show, we will be discussing male teachers in the primary sector. So grab your cup of tea or coffee and enjoy the next hour and a half. Before we chat with our guests, let's first head over to the news desk where Megan Goods has the latest educational news for us.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. New research from the London School of Economics has shown that children born in the summer are being mislabeled as having special educational needs by their primary schools. Using census records for over 6 million children who were in state primary schools over the years 2008 to 2018, Dr. Tammy Campbell found that among children reaching Year 6 in 2018, 16% of autumn-born girls had been attributed SEND support at some point during primary school, compared to 26% of summer-born girls. Similarly, 28% of autumn-born boys were given support, compared to 40% of those born in the summer. Dr. Campbell stated that the study shows how rigid prescriptive expectations not suitable for relatively younger children result in many of these children being denoted with SEND. And then the system that has created these needs cannot or will not meet them. This is because inherently, by the same conditions through which it creates some SEND, it is configured not to serve the children it attributes. It is configured instead to denote children as sufficient, good, meeting standards, expected level, or deficient, not good, not meeting standards, not at the expected level. This, the evidence begins to suggest, may contribute to increasing numbers of children being forced from the mainstream system. Teachers and schools are spending increasing portions of time serving the needs of the centralized assessment and accountability system, delineating children according to its dictates, rather than working with individuals to ensure learning, progress, and inclusion. teaching unions have criticised the government's plan to extend the school day, saying it could do more harm than good. The plan has been drawn up by Sir Kevin Collins, the government's Education Recovery Commissioner, and proposes a minimum 35-hour week and 100 hours of additional schooling. However, opposition from the Treasury could see the plan receive 10 times less funding than originally proposed, meaning the implementation of the proposal could fall short. Education spokespeople have been critical of the plan so far, with concerns over the impact on staff well-being and students feeling they are being punished for circumstances beyond their control. Criticism also centred on Ofsted's role in overseeing the rollouts of the extended school day. That was your daily education news briefing.
Welcome back. For the next 45 minutes or so, we will be talking about head teacher recruitment. And we're delighted to have with us three fabulous guests to talk about this. Joining us tonight is Dr. Jill Berry. Dr. Jill Berry was a teacher for 30 years and a head for the last 10. She now works as a leadership development consultant, serving and aspiring heads, leaders at all levels. She has written Making the Leap, Moving from Deputy to Head, which was published in 2016. This book is based on her own experiences and her doctoral research. Welcome, Jill. I can see Jill in the studio. But, hi, Jill. If you can hear me, just say hello. Right, I think Jill might be having some problems. We'll continue. Okay, Jill. If you seem to be you need to call in the show, and then I can let you in. Okay, we'll just wait till Jill arrives. We'll also be hearing from Jonathan Smith. Jonathan Smith used to be a clinical microbiologist before going into teaching. He is a teacher and a member of the SLT in a primary school. From September, Jonathan is going to be a head teacher and SENCO. Welcome, Jonathan, and thank you for joining us and coming onto the show.
Hi, Naureen. Good evening, everybody.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us. I can also see Ian Usher has joined us. Hi, Ian. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hey, Naureen. Hello, everybody. My name's Ian. I'm Vice Chair of Governors in an infant school here in West Sussex. And my day job is something else entirely, but I'm a local authority governor, Vice Chair of Governors, and we recruited for a head teacher in the last few years. And yeah, it's an interesting process from the governor's side.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. And it's good that we've got you here as well, and then we've got another governor as well. As head teacher recruitment is something which is the responsibility of the board, I thought it would be good to hear from a governor too. And so we're delighted to have Kerry Standen joining us tonight. Kerry is a safeguarding trainer and consultant. She started as a parent governor in 2013 for a primary school in North Yorkshire. She became a chair in 2016 and supported the school to become the lead school within a multi-academy trust. So, welcome, Kerry. Hi, Kerry. I can see Kerry's in the studio. But I can't say it.
I think Kerry was called in before, but it looks like
Right.
she's not at the moment.
She's not. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so let's start with Jonathan then first. Jonathan, you've recently become a head. So could you tell us a bit about yourself, about your journey to headship?
Yeah, absolutely. So before going into teaching, I was a medical microbiologist.
I was always fascinated by science as a child, so I went to study medical microbiology at university, and I absolutely loved it. I think my love really was in education, though, rather than the day-to-day monotony of the job, I guess. Because after graduating, I started the NHS training program, where I realized just how dull science can actually be on a day-to-day level. So I decided it was time for a change. And yeah, I went on to do a PGC in primary education.
Lovely. Thank you. Oh, Kerry says she's got a poor connection. Hopefully, she'll be able to join us and we can hear her. Hello, Jill. Hi, Jill.
You're in. Speak. Say hi.
Hello.
Hi, Jill.
So sorry, technical hitch.
That's all right. I've had that myself here. I was going to play my introductory jingle, and I had tested it all out, and then it decided to buffer, and therefore I went live, and there was nothing to introduce me, and so I sort of had a bit of a panic there. But thank you for joining us, Jill. I've just been telling our audience that. You have been a head teacher. You are now a leadership consultant, and you support people who are aspiring heads as well as people who are serving heads.
That's true.
And you've written a book as well on making the leap. Would you like to tell us a bit about that, please?
I certainly can. So I taught for 30 years and I was a head for the last 10. But when I became a head, I realised it was a job that I probably only wanted to do for 10 years, certainly in one school. And at the end of that time, I didn't fancy a second headship. I wanted to do something different, but still education related. So I did a doctorate about the transition to headship, and making the leap, moving from deputy to head, came out of the doctorate, really. It was writing about my doctoral research and my findings, but for a professional audience rather than an academic audience. So that's why I wrote the book, Naureen.
Lovely. And I'm sure that book has helped quite a few people who are making the leap or who are thinking of making the leap.
Yes, it's one of the most rewarding things that I get messages all the time through Twitter or through LinkedIn or through my blog from people that I don't know, haven't met, saying that they have read it as part of their preparation for headship, and it has helped them in practical terms, and also emotionally helped them to get ready. So that's hugely rewarding, Naureen.
Lovely. So what did your research tell you about this process of making the leap from deputy to head?
I had 6 research participants who were all deputies, but they'd already got their headship. So I tracked their progress through the last months of their deputy headship and into the first months of their headship, and looked at, I suppose, similarities between the 6 of them. And there were a number of things that emerged, really. One of the things is that when you become a head, you have to balance what you inherit from your predecessor and their predecessors with how you inhabit the role and make it your own. Every head wants to put their own stamp on the job and on the school. So it's a process of really balancing those two things and realizing that every new head has all kinds of assumptions and preconceptions about how the job of head should be enacted, but that in actual fact you have to tune into the context of the school you join and ask yourself, what does this school need from me? So I know what kind of head I want to be, and I hope I'm on the journey to getting there, but actually I have to look at what the school needs from me now, and I have to be able to lead the school in a way that's going to move it forward. So it was really interesting doing the research, and I really enjoyed writing the book on the back of it.
Hi, thank you for that. I don't know whether you were connected on the line when Jonathan was talking about his journey. He changed his career and became a teacher. Jonathan, what was the journey from an NQT to headship like?
So I took up my first teaching position in a 250 place 2-form entry first school. in a small market town in Northumberland. And it was the best NQT job that I could wish for. It was an incredibly supportive team, some of the most talented people I've ever worked with, very committed, in a truly, genuinely child-centered school. So I learned a lot there. From my NQT position, I stayed there for 5 years. I moved into my current school. I'd spotted an advert for a Key Stage 1 lead, and I knew I was ready for a new challenge. The school I currently work at is a 450 place 2-form entry primary. It's in a much more urban area, much more higher levels of deprivation in comparison to the previous school. And I joined that school in 2013, and I've been there for the last 8 years. And in that time, I've taken on more and more responsibility within the school, moving from phase leadership into whole school leadership. And currently, I lead on curriculum across the school. In 2018, as part of my performance management with the head teacher, we talked about my journey and where I wanted to go, and we decided that the MPQH might be an interesting challenge. So I started that in 2018 and completed that the end of 2019. I didn't start looking for a headship though until March 2020. I went to visit a school on the 22nd of March, and on the 23rd of March, everyone went into lockdown. So I kind of put that dream on hold for a little while. And actually, Jill was an important part of my journey really into this headship, because in February of this year, I had a sledging accident after taking my son sledging, and I tore the meniscus and ligaments in my knee, and I was off work for quite some time. And I read Jill's book, Making the Leap. And as I was reading it, I decided I've done my MPQH. I was ready. I kind of took a step back, but actually I am ready to make that leap now. And so I started to look for a headship, and yeah, here I am.
Oh, how wonderful. Jill was just saying that she's had messages from people who have read her book. And here we have somebody who has read your book, Jill. And
That's so good to hear. Brilliant news, Jonathan.
Yeah, and it was different though, Jill, because obviously it's about deputy to headship, and I've probably made an unusual leap in that I've moved from a TLR1 position to headship. But I'm very fortunate to work in a very large school where I'm given a lot of responsibility, or very similar to a deputy, but still not quite a deputy. So anybody out there who isn't a deputy yet and is thinking about it, there is hope.
that's a really good point to do, because we traditionally might think that there is a set career path to a deputy head, to a headship, assistant head, deputy head, and finally head. But you didn't find it that difficult not having done a deputy headship then?
I don't think so. The way that the senior leadership team works at my current school, the current head talks about it as a circle, and anybody at any point can step into the middle to take a lead. And I think I've been given some fantastic opportunities really to do the role of a deputy head without having that title. I
Right.
think also because it's a large school, salary wise, I could have made a step into deputy headship, but I would have taken a pay cut to do it. So I was very keen to continue to get all the experience I could whilst remaining in post as a TLR1.
Okay, lovely, thank you. I'd like to bring in the governors in now. The interview process, now that we've had a message on the chat. Tom Rogers says that it must be, the pressure of picking a head teacher must be immense. So tell us a bit about how did you decide, how did the process work from a governance point of view? If I could ask that, if Kerry could answer, take that question, please.
Hi, yes, hopefully you can all hear me now.
Yes, loud and clear. Hi, Kerry.
Excellent. Hi. Yeah, it is a big task, and it's one laden with responsibility. But I think how we did it in our trust was very much deciding what we needed for the school, thinking about kind of what we've had vision for the direction of the school, and therefore what we wanted to see come in as a headship really. We definitely looked at trying to increase the range of candidates that we had previously got for other headships as well. It's very interesting that your previous person was saying around taking that leap. It's really good when we get candidates who are sort of taking that leap, either from a deputy or even from other paths, because it really increases the range of the candidates we can get.
Thank you. Ian, how does the board ensure that they get a diverse range of candidates? Do all boards ensure that? My first question. And secondly, if they do, how do they go about doing that?
Well, obviously, I can't speak for all boards other than
Yeah.
our own experience. But I think there are principles, I think, that don't just apply in. I mean, diversity has many dimensions. So, I mean, with my work hat on, with my governor hat on, obviously there are certain things that happen. But with my work hat on, I've been through a recruitment process twice in the last 9 months. So I've recruited to my team. And led the recruitment on that. And one thing that my organisation where I currently work does is actually, it's an interesting one. And there are flip sides, there are two sides to it, is to actually anonymise applications and actually remove information that is helped you to identify someone in all sorts of ways. And actually from a recruiter's point of view, from purely in that context, and again, it's not a school context, but I think it applies. It was really, really helpful because I wasn't swayed by where they went to university, where they went to school, where they worked. Oh, this person has worked here. And actually, that's an interesting, but the other side was you felt a little bit blind in doing that. I felt there weren't as many kind of, tangible things to kind of ask questions internally around as I was looking at that. When we came to recruit at school, I think because I think the thing I'd say here in terms of governance is that context is really important. And obviously, if someone's in a trust, depending on how the scheme of delegation works in that trust, recruitment could be a very different prospect from one school, one academy in one trust to an academy in another trust. If you're in a maintained school, again, it depends who the employer is. My context is I'm in a voluntary aided, we govern in a voluntary aided school. Therefore, the governing board, we are the employers of the staff. We are recruiting, we are paying the staff effectively. That's quite a different context to an academy where scheme of delegation is such that you are, some people use the word franchise, and I know that's can be seen as a derogatory term, but it does actually affect, I think, the amount of leeway you have. Also, it affects the tools that you have to make that process more equitable, because in some ways you are dependent, in some cases, upon a centralized multi-academy trust, recruitment form, recruitment process. It may be handled by people who you don't see every day if there is a central HR team. So actually, obviously the role of in an academy council or as a governing board in a VA school, there's some significant differences there. So I think there are things that are applicable across beyond education as well. But again, I think I would say I was thinking about this a lot today, and I think the context about where you sit in a school is really important to that.
Right, that's a good point about who's actually doing the recruitment. Is it the local governors, or is it? I've had experience of both. I've recruited a head as part of as chair of the local governing body, and in another trust as a trustee. And I think it depends on how good the multi academy trust is and how much, like you say, they've delegated down. Jill, talking about interviews, have you because you help you support aspiring heads and people who are thinking of going into headship. What feedback do you get? Do you think the way boards routinely structure interviews, are they structured in a way to get the best out of the candidates?
I think it varies, Naureen, and I think different governing bodies, different authorities, different multi-academy trusts can do it quite differently. I mean, interestingly, I had 4 headship interviews. I got the 4th. They were all very, very different from each other. And I think certainly the one I got was the right one for me. It was the right school. I was the right fit. I was very happy there. So I had no regrets about earlier failures, but it's interesting that I think some governing bodies or some trusts are far better than others. at giving the candidates the opportunity to shine. I've also worked with governing bodies since I finished my headship, which is 11 years ago now. I've worked with a number of governing bodies as an external independent education consultant just to help them through the process. And I've really relished the opportunity to make sure that they do make sure that the process is fair and reasonable and balanced and humane and insightful. But I have to say, I think there is variety across different schools and different organisations.
So again, if I put the same question I did to Ian to you, Jill, about diversity, have you seen any good practice which you can share with us about how boards have tried to ensure that they get a diverse range of candidates in front of them?
I think things are getting better all the time, because I think there's just such awareness now of how crucially important it is. And it's about redressing a balance. There's been an imbalance for a long time. And certainly my advice to governors would be that they need to be very open-minded and receptive, and really watch out for the unconscious bias, which means they have all kinds of unhelpful preconceptions about what leadership is and what headship looks like. And I don't see that committing to diversity and inclusion and equity is at odds with expecting the very highest standards. I don't think it's in tension with the idea of merit, because you appoint the best person, but you want the broadest possible field, and you want to make the most of the talents of absolutely everyone. And if you're not diverse and equitable, you're not doing that, are you? And so you're not bringing forward those positive role models who can be a fantastic example to the young people in our schools of what can be achieved. And you're not tapping into the strengths of the whole education community. So I definitely think it's getting better, because I think we're much more aware than perhaps we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago when I was first appointed.
Yeah, that's a good point. That unless you make it support everybody to apply, you can't be sure that you have applied the best person, because that best person may be out there and didn't feel comfortable enough to apply. So
Definitely.
yes, so committing to getting a diverse board, a diverse range of candidates, isn't at odds with appointing the best person, I think.
No, it's helpful, in fact.
Yes, it's true. So, Jonathan, just looking at the process, congratulations September.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, enjoy it. It's the best job in the world, as John Thompson said. Did you as part of the appointment process, did you you said you visited the school? Do you think that was an important part, important for you to visit the school?
Yes, I think I was really lucky, because there were a few different headships that were advertised at the time, and a few had specifically said that visits may not be possible because of COVID regulations. So I was really lucky that I got to visit the school, and I think it's really important to do that. And I think it's linked to what Jill was saying about you inhabit the role, but you have to understand the context of the school that you're going to be applying for and you're going to be leading. And visiting a school is very much part of kind of finding out a little bit more about it. I think schools are living, breathing organisms that when you see them in action, you get to have a real sense of how they function. And I think you can feel a school culture when you walk around it and you talk to the staff. Unfortunately, I couldn't speak to the students at the time because it was an after-school visit. But yeah, I think it was really important. I think when I first applied for my very first teaching post, I took a massive gamble and didn't visit the school. I actually applied for the job on the Saturday and it closed on the Sunday evening. I left my job application with the next door neighbour and asked her to post it for me. And I was really lucky, because that could have been awful. I could have ended up in a terrible school. But I would never do that again. I think visiting a school is critical.
Ian and Kerry, question to you. If you had a candidate who did not visit the school, even when offered, they said they don't think it's would that sort of give you an unconscious black mark against that candidate?
I would say that, yeah, quite possibly. And again, it's interesting, isn't it? We talk about unconscious bias and then an unconscious mark against someone when they don't visit the school.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, I would say that in terms of anything, any behaviours or characteristics that are exhibited before interview, if someone comes to interview, you can pick that up at interview and see how they respond. I think it's an opportunity to. So why did you feel you didn't need to come? And it's something you wouldn't, obviously, you take a different tack, use that time differently when you have someone who had visited the school. And I think one of the interesting things I think about unconscious bias, and I saw this, but the visiting the school is an interesting one, is if you have an internal candidate, because I think actually the dynamics there are just completely. I don't know if it throws. I'd be interested if Jonathan was up against, if he knew, he may not know, was up against any internal candidates and how that kind of sways things or not. Because I think actually often people say, well, obviously everyone wants that person to get promoted and move from deputy or whatever, but not everyone might do. And there's some really odd dynamics in that, and I think that's something that I've never really heard discussed. Obviously, internal candidates, are good, bad, or otherwise, because everyone starts somewhere. But when we were recruiting, we had representation from the local authority and the diocese. We are a diocesan school, and there was varying degrees of advice about whether we should take the internal candidate or not. And it was very much not all in one direction. So as governors, we were having to kind of, the internal candidate. You don't know the external ones other than what you see when they visit and when they interview. But also you've got other voices who have an opinion, some experience, but ultimately aren't going to be responsible for line managing and working with this person for the next N number of years. So I think that there's an interesting thing there for me, and I think that's often not. But obviously, that person has got the ultimate visit, so they are at an advantage, you might say.
Kerry, would somebody who's not come in to visit a school before coming for the interview, would that be a black mark in your book?
To be honest with you, no, I don't think it would, because I would be really interested as to what they knew about the school. For me, it's about what research have they done about the school, and therefore hopefully pulling out the reasons why they didn't feel a visit was needed, or if they couldn't fit it in. Or I wouldn't want to have any kind of black mark against someone due to their circumstances, that maybe a visit wasn't possible. I think it's really important that a candidate does research on the school, and if it's a part of a trust, research on the trust. And in my experience of recruiting head teachers, a lot of the questions that we used was around people's knowledge of the school and what their vision might be for that school, or where they felt they personally had strengths that they could add to the school. And the only way they could answer that was having knowledge of the school. So yes, a visit would absolutely be recommended, but I know for experience that sometimes visits aren't always possible, especially if the candidate doesn't want to declare to their existing school that they're going for interview. Until they have an interview. So therefore it can be quite difficult to take time away and visit a school. So I think we have to be open-minded as to sort of reasons behind that.
Yeah, I was just about to say that we once when we were appointing a head, we had somebody ring us and say that they won't be coming in for a visit because of the fact that they didn't want the present school to find out that they were thinking of applying. And we said that's fine, you obviously know your circumstances the best, but if you want to come in after school, obviously that won't give you the feel of the school, the working school, but we're quite happy to arrange a visit for you anytime which suits you, so that you do, even if it's, I think one part of the visit is not only the visit the working school, it's the locality, how long will it take for you to drive from home to school, and all of that probably pays something to consider as well. So yes, yes, if no black mark, try to see what you can do to encourage them to come, and if they don't, explore that at interview. Thank you. That's yeah. Sorry.
Jill has made the comment in the chat there that actually it's an important way of finding out more about, for the candidate, finding out whether it fits. That's absolutely critical, because if you're appointing as a governing board, you want someone to say, yes, I want to be at this school. You want to have, I'm all about making informed decisions either way. Actually, if someone turned around and said, you know what, I've come interview, come for interview, but I was here before and it didn't feel like the right fit. Good grief,
Mm.
you'd want to know that, wouldn't you? And you want that to be as informed a decision as possible.
Yeah.
And I think there is all sorts of, it is a two-way. It's a process in both directions, isn't it?
Yes.
The candidate is not interviewing the school, but they are evaluating: could I see myself here?
Yeah.
Could I not necessarily fit, because it's not always a perfect fit, but could I work here? Could I work with these people, these children? Does it feel? How does it feel? And that's absolutely critical. And again, I think, as Jill says, there's a big bit missing from the experience there.
Yes. Yeah. Just the point you raised earlier about internal candidates. We again had somebody who said to us that, do you have any internal candidates applying for the job? And if somebody says that, my response to that would be, if there is an internal candidate, that might be a disadvantage to the candidate as well, because the board may know them completely, thoroughly inside out. So there's no place to hide for an internal candidate. So if there's anybody listening in who is thinking of applying, don't be put off if there are internal candidates. And the other thing is, boards really don't want to waste your time or their own time, so they wouldn't have shortlisted you if they didn't think you had a very good chance of progressing ahead. Jill, what again, this is to do with internal candidates. What would your advice be to someone who was going for a job and knew that there were internal candidates there too?
It's interesting, Naureen, because I help people, aspiring heads, who are external candidates and they're up against internal candidates. But of course, I also advise people who are internal candidates who know that they're being measured against external candidates. And my advice is that as an internal and as an external, you have some advantages and you have some disadvantages. I think ultimately they kind of cancel each other out. So I wouldn't say to an external, you'll have a poorer chance of getting the job if there's an internal. And I wouldn't say that to an internal candidate either. So I think you just have to be aware of what the advantages of your position are and what the disadvantages of your position are, if it's internal and external side by side, and do the best you can to show that you would add a lot of value in that role and that you are a good match. What you bring to the role aligns with what the school seems to need. So try not to let the barrier be in your own head. Often those barriers are in our heads, Naureen. Often people don't apply, or they apply but they don't quite have the self-belief because of the barriers they're erecting themselves. And my job, if I'm supporting an aspiring head, is to help break down some of those barriers and encourage people to go in feeling a degree of confidence. And your point about if they wouldn't waste their time, I would say to everybody who's interviewed, if you don't get the job, it doesn't mean you're not capable of doing it and you're not capable of doing it well. It just means that they think someone else is a better match for what they need. And therefore it isn't the right job for you. So that's one way of getting your head around disappointment, I think, whether you're internal or external.
Yes, thank you. If there were any aspiring heads listening in now, or what would your advice be? How can they prepare for headship? Jill.
Hey, Naureen, yeah. Hello?
Hi. Oh, hi.
Is that a question to me?
Yes, Jill. Because, like you said, you support people who are going in for headship, and how would you advise them to prepare for headship?
Obviously, I would advise them to read Making the Leap, moving from deputy to head, and anything else that they can get their head on that just gets them to the head round, that helps them to think about what it might mean to move to headship. I mean, I think that leadership is leadership, and the best preparation for being a good head is to be a strong middle leader or a strong senior leader. And basically, you're doing the same job, but just on a much broader canvas. I don't think it's a completely different job. I think it's just a different scale. So do some reading, do some thinking, maybe shadow or observe a head in another school just to give you additional insights. Talk to your current head, ask them what they think you should be reading or what podcasts you should be listening to or what webinars you should be watching. And I think there needs to be something on your application form which suggests you have done formal professional development that's related to stepping up to headship. I'm always a little bit unsure if I look at an application and there's nothing there that relates to planning for the future. I think you should be investing in some professional development that relates to the head's role. So there are lots of things you can do in preparation, but I always have to quote Robert Quinn, who says that in any new leadership role, you have to build the bridge as you walk on it. So you can prepare, and you should prepare, but ultimately you will learn how to be a head from the experience of being a head. You can't complete your preparation without actually living the role, learning from experience, making mistakes sometimes, and doing better in the future. But my main piece of advice is go for it. Being a head is the best job. You make a difference on a scale unlike any other you've ever known. And there is joy in headship. It's a privileged position. So if you think you want to do it, go for it. You're more likely to regret the things you don't do than the things you do.
That's really good advice. Thank you, Jill. Jonathan, we talked a bit about knowing the school you are applying at. How did you do research about the school? What did you look at?
I started by looking at their online presence, looking at their website, looking at their Facebook page. I knew a little bit about the school already because I'd worked in that partnership, looking at Key Stage 1 assessment. I think school websites are much more thorough now than when I first started teaching, so it's possible to get a more detailed feel about the school from there, particularly if they publish things such as governor minutes. I looked at the most recent Ofsted report, performance information, the financial data that you can get on the benchmarking site. I also looked at the local areas on the index of multiple deprivation, because I think that gives you a really good insight into the catchment area. And just driving around the area is really insightful, just to understand where the children are coming from. So most of it was online, and then some kind of personal relationships I had with people in the partnership.
Okay, thank you. Kerry, when someone goes for a head's job, we've seen that, and this is especially true for women, that they don't apply unless they think they can take every